The old Chevy truck rumbled down Highway 47, carrying two brothers who hadn't been home in almost 6 years. The younger one, 29-year-old Isaiah, sat in the passenger seat watching the familiar pine trees blur past the window. His older brother, 32-year-old Dante, kept his eyes on the road, one hand loose on the steering wheel like he'd done this drive 1,000 times before. Neither of them said much. They didn't need to. When you've spent years working together in places most people can't pronounce, you learn to be comfortable in silence. "Road looks the same," Isaiah finally said, breaking the quiet that had stretched for the last 20 miles. Dante nodded. "Everything looks the same. That's the problem with small towns. They freeze in time while the rest of the world keeps moving." They were heading to Millbrook, the tiny town where they'd grown up. Population 3,200, give or take. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody's business and nothing much changed from one decade to the next. There was one high school, 2 churches, a handful of stores on Main Street, and more pickup trucks than people. The brothers were coming back for a reason they'd both been dreading. Their mother had passed away 3 months ago. Heart attack, sudden and quick. They'd made it back for the funeral, stayed 2 days, then had to leave again for work. Now they were finally returning to sort through her things, settle the estate, and say a proper goodbye to the house where they'd grown up. "You think the house is going to feel smaller?" Isaiah asked. "Everything feels smaller when you go back," Dante said. His voice was steady, controlled. That's how he always sounded now. Calm, measured, like he was constantly calculating 3 steps ahead. "Remember when we thought the backyard was huge? Bet it's not even half the size we remember." Isaiah smiled a little at that. "I used to think the walk to school was like 5 miles. Probably wasn't even 1. They passed the old Sunoco station at the edge of town, the same one where they'd bought candy as kids with whatever spare change they could scrape together. The sign was more faded now, rust eating at the corners, but it was still standing. "You hungry?" Dante asked as they rolled past the high school. The football field looked exactly the same, goalposts standing tall against the evening sky. Isaiah shrugged. "Could eat. There's that diner out on Route 9, Betty's place, still open last I checked. The one with the good pie?" "That's the one," Isaiah nodded. "Yeah, let's stop there. We can head to the house after." Neither of them mentioned the real reason they didn't want to go straight to the house. It was going to hurt. Walking into that empty place where their mother's voice used to fill every room. Better to put it off a little longer, ease into it with coffee and pie first. The sun was starting to set as they pulled into the gravel parking lot of Betty's place. It was a small building, all wood paneling and neon signs, the kind of diner that had been serving the same menu since 1970. A few trucks were scattered around the lot, along with a couple of sedans that had seen better days. "Looks busy," Isaiah said, though there were only maybe 4 vehicles total. "This is busy for Millbrook," Dante replied with a slight grin. They climbed out of the truck, both of them moving with an easy confidence that came from years of discipline. Dante was tall and broad-shouldered, built like someone who'd spent most of his adult life staying in peak physical condition. Isaiah was slightly shorter but just as solid, with quick movements and alert eyes that constantly scanned his surroundings. To anyone watching, they might have looked like regular guys coming home. Maybe construction workers or athletes. Nobody in Millbrook knew what they really did for a living. When people asked, they'd always said the same thing. Government contractors. It was vague enough to be boring, and boring questions didn't get follow-up questions. The truth was more complicated. Dante had spent the last decade in the Navy, working in places and doing things he could never talk about. Special operations, the kind that didn't make the news. Isaiah had taken a similar path through the Army, ending up in units that most people didn't even know existed. They'd each seen more combat than most soldiers saw in a lifetime, and they carried that experience in the way they moved. The way they watched doors when they entered rooms, the way they positioned themselves with their backs to walls. But tonight, they were just 2 brothers getting dinner. The bell above the door jingled as they walked in. The diner had that familiar smell of coffee, grease, and something baking in the kitchen. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, and a long counter ran down one side with spinning stools that squeaked when you sat on them. Country music played softly from a radio behind the counter. The moment they stepped inside, Dante felt it. That shift in the air. Conversations didn't exactly stop, but they got quieter. Eyes turned toward them, lingered a little too long, then looked away. It was subtle, but he'd learned to recognize that feeling years ago. growing up black in a mostly white town. Isaiah felt it too. His jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his expression neutral. "Just grab a booth?" Isaiah asked quietly. "Yeah," Dante said. "By the window." They walked past the counter where an older waitress with gray hair pulled back in a bun was refilling coffee cups. She glanced at them with surprise, then something that might have been recognition. "Dante, Isaiah Williams?" she asked, her voice carrying that southern drawl that never quite left this part of the state. Dante turned, managing a polite smile. "Yes, ma'am, Betty. Lord, I haven't seen you boys in years." Betty set down the coffee pot and came around the counter. "I was so sorry to hear about your mama. She was a good woman. Came in here every Sunday after church for years." "Thank you," Dante said. "We appreciate that. Y'all sit wherever you like. I'll be right over to take your order." They settled into a booth by the window, Isaiah sliding in to face the door. Old habits. Dante sat across from him, positioning himself so he could see the rest of the diner in his peripheral vision. There were maybe a dozen other people in the place. A couple sat in a booth near the back, not paying them any attention. An old man at the counter was focused on his newspaper. But in the corner booth, there was a group of 5 men, all white, probably in their 30s and 40s. They were the ones watching. Dante recognized the type immediately. Rough clothes, worn boots, calloused hands. Working guys, probably from the lumber mill or one of the construction crews that operated in the area. But it was more than that. There was something in the way they were looking over, the way one of them leaned in to whisper something that made another one smirk. "Don't worry about it," Dante said quietly, picking up the plastic menu even though he already knew what he wanted. "I'm not worried," Isaiah replied, but his shoulders were a little more tense than they'd been a minute ago. Betty came over with 2 glasses of water and her order pad. "What can I get you boys?" "Coffee black," Dante said, "and a slice of whatever pie you've got. Apple or cherry?" "Apple's good. Make that 2, Isaiah added. Betty smiled. "Coming right up, sweethearts." As she walked away, one of the men from the corner booth said something just loud enough to carry across the diner. "Must be nice having the whole place to yourself." Another one laughed. It wasn't a friendly sound. Dante took a slow breath, keeping his face calm. He'd been in 100 situations more dangerous than this. Actual combat zones where people were actively trying to kill him. Some drunk guys making comments in a diner didn't even register on that scale, but it still got under his skin in a way that firefights never did. This felt personal in a different way. "You good?" Isaiah asked, his voice low. "Yeah. You?" "Always." Betty brought their coffee and pie, setting it down with an apologetic look that said she'd heard the comment too. "Y'all let me know if you need anything else." The pie was good. Warm, with just enough cinnamon, the crust flaky and buttery. For a few minutes they just ate in silence, savoring something simple and familiar. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky, turning everything that soft blue color that comes right before dark. "Remember when Mom used to bring us here?" Isaiah said. "We'd sit in this exact booth every birthday," Dante said. "She'd let us order whatever we wanted. I always got the burger with extra pickles, and I'd get the grilled cheese with fries." Isaiah smiled at the memory. She'd always order the chef salad and pick at it while watching us eat. She just liked watching us be happy. They finished their pie, drank their coffee, and Dante signaled Betty for the check. She brought it over quickly, and he left cash on the table with a generous tip. "Ready?" Dante asked. Isaiah nodded. "Let's go." They stood up, and as they walked toward the door, one of the men from the corner booth stood up too. He was big, maybe 6'2", with a shaved head and a scar running through his left eyebrow. His arms were covered in faded tattoos, some of which Dante recognized from his time overseas. Prison ink, gang symbols, the kind of markings that told a story about who someone was. "Hey," the man said, his voice hard. "Y'all come back here thinking you own the place or something?" Dante stopped but didn't turn around completely. "Just getting dinner, not looking for trouble." "Well, maybe trouble's looking for you," another one said, and now all 5 of them were standing up, spreading out slightly. Isaiah's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward his pocket, then stopped. They didn't carry weapons when they were home. Didn't need to, usually, but right now he wished he had options. "We're leaving," Dante said, his voice still calm. "Have a good evening." He pushed open the door and Isaiah followed. Behind them they heard chairs scraping, boots on the floor. "This isn't over," someone called out. The brothers walked to their truck, moving at a normal pace, Not running, not rushing, but purposeful. Dante unlocked the doors and they climbed in. Through the diner window, they could see the 5 men gathering near the door, talking among themselves. "They're coming out," Isaiah said. "I know." Dante started the engine. "We're not doing this. Not here." But as they started to back out of the parking space, the 5 men emerged from the diner and spread out across the lot, blocking the exit. The big one with the scar walked right up to the driver's side window, standing close enough that Dante could have opened the door and hit him with it. "Where you think you're going?" the man asked, leaning down to look through the window. Dante kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. "Like I said, just heading home. This is our town, always has been. And we don't appreciate outsiders coming around acting like they belong. We grew up here," Isaiah said from the passenger seat. "We've got as much right to be here as anyone." The man's face twisted into something ugly. "That's where you're wrong, boy." And that's when Dante knew there was no talking their way out of this. He'd seen that look before in different places on different faces. It was the look of someone who'd already decided violence was the answer, who was just looking for an excuse to justify what they were about to do. He glanced at Isaiah, and his brother gave the smallest nod. They understood each other perfectly. "Get out of the truck," the man demanded, stepping back and pulling something from his belt. A wooden bat, worn smooth from use. The other 4 spread out, 2 on each side of the vehicle. One had a length of chain wrapped around his fist. Another held a knife, the blade catching the last bit of light from the diner's neon sign. Dante turned off the engine. "Last chance to walk away," he said quietly. The man with the bat laughed. "You threatening me?" "No," Dante said, opening his door slowly. "Just giving you information." As both brothers stepped out of the truck into the gravel parking lot, the 5 men closed in around them, weapons ready, confident in their numbers and their advantage. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The parking lot was quiet except for the crunch of gravel under boots and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. The 5 men formed a loose circle around Dante and Isaiah, blocking any easy path back to the truck or toward the road. The big one with the scar, clearly the leader, tapped his bat against his palm. "You boys should have just kept driving when you came into town. Nobody wants you here." Dante stood completely still, his hands loose at his sides. He wasn't tense, wasn't coiled up ready to spring. That's what most people did when they were about to fight, and it telegraphed everything. Instead, he looked almost relaxed, like they were just having a conversation. Isaiah mirrored his posture on the other side of the truck, his breathing slow and steady. "We don't want trouble," Dante said again, his voice carrying that same calm tone. "But if you're determined to do this, you should know something first." "What's that?" The man sneered. "You're going to lose." The man with the chain laughed. 5 against 2, and you think you're gonna win? Man, you really are stupid." "Numbers don't mean what you think they mean," Isaiah said quietly. "And those weapons you're holding? They're just giving us something to take away from you." For a second, uncertainty flickered across a couple of their faces. There was something in the way these 2 brothers were standing, something in their eyes that didn't match what should have been happening. Most people, when they're outnumbered and staring down weapons, show fear, panic. These 2 looked like they were waiting for a bus. But the leader's pride was too big to back down now. "Let's teach these boys some respect," he said, and swung the bat hard at Dante's head. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Dante didn't move backward. He moved forward, inside the swing's arc where the bat had no power. His left hand came up and caught the bat mid-swing, stopping it dead. His right hand shot out in a short, sharp strike to the man's solar plexus, right under the rib cage where the nerve cluster sits. The air left the man's lungs in a whoosh and his grip on the bat went slack. Dante twisted the bat free, tossed it aside, and before the man could even process what was happening, swept his legs out from under him. The leader went down hard on his back, gasping like a fish out of water. At the same moment, 2 men rushed Isaiah from different angles. The one with the knife came in first, slashing wild and angry. Isaiah sidestepped the blade like he'd choreographed it, his body moving with that fluid economy of motion that comes from thousands of hours of training. He caught the man's wrist, twisted it in a way wrists aren't meant to twist, and the knife clattered to the gravel. A sharp elbow to the temple and the man dropped. The second attacker, the one with the chain, tried to wrap it around Isaiah's neck from behind. Isaiah ducked under, spun inside the man's reach and drove his palm into the guy's nose. Not enough to break it, but enough to make his eyes water and his brain reset. A quick leg sweep and he was down 2. The remaining 2 hesitated, suddenly realizing this wasn't going the way they'd planned. One of them, younger than the others with a patchy beard, actually took a step back. "Smart," Dante said, breathing easy. He hadn't even broken a sweat. You should listen to that instinct. But the last guy, older with a beer belly and a trucker cap, pulled out a pocket knife and flicked it open. "I'm gonna cut you," he snarled. Isaiah shook his head. "Don't." The man lunged anyway, leading with the knife in a clumsy overhand stab. Isaiah moved like water flowing around the attack. He trapped the man's arm, applied pressure to the elbow joint in a way that made the man's whole body go rigid with pain, and guided him face first into the side of the truck. The knife fell. The man slid down the truck's panel and sat in the gravel, dazed. The young one with the patchy beard raised his hands. "I'm done. I'm out." "Good choice," Dante said. The whole thing, from the first swing to the last man going down, had taken maybe 90 seconds. 5 men, all armed, all bigger than average, all convinced they had the advantage. Now 4 of them were on the ground, and the 5th had surrendered without throwing a punch. The leader was starting to get his breath back, still lying on the gravel. He looked up at Dante with confusion and anger mixed together. What are you?" "We're just 2 guys trying to get dinner," Dante said. "You made assumptions. Bad ones." Isaiah walked over to where the weapons had fallen and kicked them away, scattering them across the parking lot where nobody could reach them easily. He checked each man quickly, making sure nobody was seriously hurt. Bruised egos and sore bodies, but nothing permanent. That had been the point. "You broke my wrist," the knife guy moaned, cradling his arm. "It's sprained, not broken," Isaiah corrected. "Ice it when you get home. Keep it elevated. You'll be fine in a week." The man with the bloody nose sat up, pinching his nostrils. "You could have killed us." "We could have," Dante agreed. "But we didn't, remember that." The brothers walked back to their truck, got in, and started the engine. The 5 men stayed where they were, no longer blocking the exit. As Dante backed out and turned toward the road, he could see them in the rearview mirror, still sitting or standing in the parking lot, looking like they'd just been hit by a tornado. "That went well," Isaiah said with just a hint of sarcasm. "Could have been worse. Could have been better if they'd just let us eat our pie in peace." They drove in silence for a few minutes, leaving the diner behind. The adrenaline was already fading from their systems. They'd been in enough real combat that a parking lot scuffle barely registered. But Dante's jaw was tight and Isaiah was staring out the window harder than necessary. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Isaiah finally asked. "That this probably isn't over?" "Yeah," Dante nodded. "Guy like that, with that much hate and that much pride? He's not going to let it go. We embarrassed him in front of his friends. So what do? We do what we came here to do. Handle Mom's house, stay a couple days, keep our heads down." Dante turned onto the old country road that led to their childhood home. "But we stay ready, just in case." The house sat at the end of a long dirt driveway surrounded by pine trees and scrub brush. It was a small ranch-style place with faded blue siding and a porch that wrapped around the front. The grass needed cutting and the mailbox was stuffed with junk mail, but it was still standing. Still home. They pulled up and sat in the truck for a moment, neither one wanting to be the first to get out. "You ready for this?" Dante asked. "No," Isaiah said honestly, "but let's do it anyway." Inside, the house smelled like dust and closed windows. Everything was exactly where their mother had left it. Her reading glasses on the coffee table. A half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen counter. The refrigerator still humming, though they'd need to clean it out. It was like she'd just stepped out for groceries and would be back any minute. Isaiah picked up a framed photo from the mantel. It showed the 3 of them from maybe 15 years ago, before the brothers had enlisted. Their mother stood between them, barely reaching their shoulders even then, with a smile that could light up a room. "She was proud of us, you know," Isaiah said quietly, "even though she worried every single day." "I know." Dante's voice was rough. "She never said it, but I could see it in her eyes every time we came home. Relief that we were alive and fear that next time we might not be. She understood, though, why we did it." "Yeah, she did." They spent the next few hours going through rooms, making piles of what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. It was slow, painful work. Every item had a memory attached. Every drawer held something that made them stop and remember. Around midnight, they were sitting on the porch drinking sweet tea from a pitcher they'd found in the fridge when Isaiah's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and frowned. "What is it?" Dante asked. Text from Jerome. You remember him? Used to play basketball with us? Yeah, what's he want? Isaiah read the message, his frown deepening. He says we should leave town. Says there's talk going around. That guy from the diner, his name's Dale Kruger. Apparently he runs with some white supremacist groups in the area. Jerome says Dale's putting word out, calling in favors. Dante set down his tea. How many favors? Jerome doesn't know. But enough that he's worried. Says Dale's got connections to groups in 3 counties. Of course he does. Dante stood up, looking out at the dark driveway. We could leave. Head out tonight, come back another time to finish the house. Isaiah stood too, moving beside his brother. Or we stay. This is our home, our mother's house. We've got a right to be here. You know if we stay, they're probably coming. I know. Isaiah thought about it for a long moment, then nodded. Then we stay. But we do it smart. Over the next hour, they transformed their childhood home into something else entirely. It wasn't exactly a fortress, but it was close. They moved furniture to create sight lines and defensive positions. They identified which windows had the best views of the driveway and the surrounding woods. They checked every door and lock, reinforced what they could with what they had. Dante walked the property line with a flashlight, memorizing the terrain the way he'd done in a dozen different countries. Where the ground was soft, where it was hard, which trees provided cover, which ones were exposed. The best approaches, the worst ones. Isaiah worked inside, setting up what they called deterrence. Nothing illegal, nothing lethal, just smart positioning of objects and furniture that would slow down anyone trying to force their way in. He also called Jerome back and asked him to notify the sheriff's office that there might be trouble at their address. What did he say? Dante asked when he came back inside. He called them. Dispatcher said they'd send someone by if they got a chance, but they're short-staffed tonight. So we're on our own. We've been on our own before. Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, we have. They took turns on watch, 2-hour shifts through the night. Nothing happened. No cars came down the driveway. No sounds except crickets and the occasional owl. By dawn, they were both tired but relieved. Maybe Jerome was wrong, Isaiah said over coffee. Maybe Dale decided we weren't worth the trouble. Maybe, Dante said. But he didn't sound convinced. They spent the morning continuing to sort through their mother's things, but neither of them could shake the feeling that something was building, that pressure in the air before a storm breaks. Around 2 in the afternoon, Dante's phone rang. It was Jerome again. They're coming, Jerome said without preamble. Tonight. I heard it from 3 different people. Dale's been on the phone all morning. He's bringing a lot of guys, Dante. More than I thought. Guns, everything. How many? At least 15. Maybe more. Dante closed his eyes. This was way beyond a simple revenge beating. This was organized, planned. This was hate with intention behind it. Thanks for the warning, Jerome. Y'all should really leave, man. This isn't worth dying over. We appreciate the concern. We'll handle it. He hung up and looked at Isaiah. It's happening, tonight. 15 men, probably armed. Isaiah didn't look scared. He looked focused, the way he always did before a mission. Then we'd better get ready. We've got about 6 hours to prepare. We should call the police again, already on it. Isaiah had his phone out, dialing. He explained the situation to the dispatcher, giving details about the threat, about Dale, about everything Jerome had told them. The dispatcher said she'd send a unit right away. An hour passed. No unit came. Isaiah called again. This time the dispatcher said all units were responding to an accident on the highway, but someone would get there as soon as possible. They're not coming, Dante said flatly. Either they don't believe us or they don't care or someone's making sure they stay busy elsewhere. So what's the play? Dante looked at his younger brother, seeing the same determination he'd seen on 100 operations. They'd survived worse odds in worse places. They'd protected each other through things that would have broken most people. This was just one more fight on ground they knew better than anyone. We hold the line, Dante said. We use everything we've learned. We stay smart, stay disciplined, and we don't give them an inch. Non-lethal, as much as possible. We're not killers, not like this. But we defend ourselves. We defend this house, Isaiah nodded. Then let's show them what a mistake looks like. As the sun started its slow descent toward the horizon, the brothers made their final preparations. They'd turned their mother's house into a tactical puzzle that would confuse, slow, and frustrate anyone trying to force entry. They'd positioned themselves with clear sight lines and communication signals they'd used in combat zones halfway around the world. They were 2 men about to face 15 or more. But they weren't just any 2 men. They were brothers who'd walked through fire together, who'd survived the worst humanity had to offer, who'd trained for years to be the best at what they did, and what they did was win. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky orange and red. Somewhere out there, Dale and his gang were gathering, preparing for what they thought would be an easy victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Dante checked his watch. Should be dark in about an hour. Good, Isaiah said, his voice calm. Darkness is our friend. They settled into their positions and waited for the storm to arrive. The darkness came slowly, then all at once. 1 minute there was still a band of orange light on the horizon, and the next the world was black except for the stars overhead and the single porch light Dante had left on. Everything else in the house was dark. Isaiah sat on the floor of the upstairs bedroom, his back against the wall, watching the driveway through the window. He'd removed the screen earlier and opened the window just enough to hear clearly. From this position, he could see the entire approach to the house and most of the front yard. Dante was downstairs in the living room, positioned where he could cover the back door and side windows. They'd turned off their phones an hour ago. No distractions, no light from screens giving away positions. They communicated through a series of hand signals they could see in the dim light, and through small sounds that wouldn't carry beyond the house. 2 clicks of the tongue meant I see something. 3 clicks meant multiple targets. 1 long whistle meant get ready. It was 9:47 p.m. When Isaiah heard the first engine, he clicked his tongue twice. Downstairs he heard Dante shift position slightly in acknowledgement. The sound grew louder, not just one vehicle, but several. They were coming in slow, no headlights, trying to be stealthy. Isaiah counted 4 trucks rolling down the dirt driveway, spacing themselves out. They stopped about 50 yards from the house, just at the edge where the driveway met the clearing. Doors opened and closed. Soft thumps in the darkness. Men climbed out, at least a dozen that Isaiah could make out. Probably more he couldn't see yet. They gathered in a cluster, conferring in low voices. Someone had a flashlight and was gesturing toward the house, making a plan. Isaiah clicked 3 times. Multiple targets confirmed. Then he saw something that made his jaw tighten. One of the men was pulling something from the bed of a truck. Glass bottles with rags stuffed in the necks. Molotov cocktails. They weren't just coming to threaten or fight. They were coming to burn. He gave 1 long whistle. Downstairs, Dante moved to the phone they'd left plugged into the wall, the old landline their mother had kept for emergencies. He dialed 911, and when the dispatcher answered, he spoke quickly and clearly. This is Dante Williams at 1847 Pine Ridge Road. We have approximately 15 armed individuals on our property with incendiary devices. They're preparing to assault the house. We need law enforcement immediately. Sir, can you repeat that? He repeated it word for word, adding every detail he could. The dispatcher said units were being dispatched, but her tone suggested she didn't quite believe what she was hearing. How long? Dante asked. Sir, officers are responding from the highway incident. It could be 20 to 30 minutes. We might not have 30 minutes. Sir, I need you to stay on the line. He hung up. 30 minutes might as well be 30 hours. Whatever was going to happen would be over long before then. Outside, the men were moving into position. Dale's voice carried across the clearing, loud enough for Isaiah to hear. Surround it. They can't watch every side at once. When I give the word, light 'em up. Burn these boys out and we'll be waiting when they run. Someone laughed, ugly and eager. Isaiah counted heads as they spread out, 14 that he could see clearly, maybe 1 or 2 more staying with the trucks. They moved like they'd done this before, not professionals, but practiced. Some of them carried bats and tire irons. At least 5 had what looked like hunting rifles or shotguns. This was bad. Worse than the parking lot. These men had come prepared for war. The first Molotov cocktail came flying through the darkness, trailing fire like a comet. It hit the front porch and exploded in a bloom of flame, gasoline spreading across the old wood. A second bottle followed, crashing through the living room window in a shower of glass. Dante had already moved away from that window, anticipating exactly this. The flames caught on the curtains their mother had hung 20 years ago, and smoke began filling the room. He grabbed the fire extinguisher he'd positioned nearby and sprayed foam across the flames, knocking them down before they could spread. but more bottles were coming. 3 smashed into the side of the house, 1 hit the roof. Fire licked up the siding and smoke was starting to pour from multiple points. The house was old dry wood that would burn fast once it really caught. "They're trying to smoke us out," Isaiah called down. "I know." Dante sprayed another section of fire. "Hold position." Outside, the men were getting bolder, moving closer to the house. Dale was shouting orders. "Watch the doors! Front and back! The second they come out, you know what to do." That's when Isaiah saw the opening. They'd positioned themselves exactly where he'd hoped they would, focused entirely on the doors, expecting the brothers to come running out coughing and desperate. Nobody was watching the windows on the second floor. He moved to the bathroom where they'd filled the tub earlier. Next to it sat every pot, bucket, and container they could find, all filled with water. He grabbed the biggest one and moved back to the bedroom window. Below, 3 men stood watching the front door, rifles ready. Isaiah waited until they were clustered close together, then dumped the entire bucket straight down. 20 gallons of cold water hit them from above like a waterfall. They shouted in surprise, stumbling backward, and in their confusion, one of them dropped his rifle. Isaiah was already moving, grabbing another container, hitting a different group on the other side. The confusion bought Dante precious seconds. He used the extinguisher to knock down the worst of the fires, then grabbed containers of water they'd staged around the house and started dousing hot spots. The smoke was thick, burning his throat, but he'd operated in worse conditions. More Molotov cocktails came, but now the men were angry and less accurate. 2 missed the house entirely. 1 hit the gravel driveway and burned itself out harmlessly. "They're getting frustrated," Isaiah called down. He could see Dale screaming at his men, pointing at the house. The plan wasn't working the way they'd expected. The house wasn't burning fast enough and the brothers weren't panicking. That's when Dale made his first big mistake. "Rush it! Front door!" "Go, go, go!" 4 men charged the porch, thinking they'd smash through and overwhelm whoever was inside. But Dante had prepared for this. He'd moved furniture, creating a maze inside the house. The front door wasn't even locked anymore because he wanted them to come through it. The door burst open and the men rushed in, running straight into complete darkness and a configuration of furniture that made no sense. The first man tripped over the coffee table that Dante had positioned 3 feet from the entrance. He went down hard and the second man fell over him. The third and fourth crashed into a bookshelf that tipped and scattered books everywhere. In the chaos and darkness, Dante moved like a ghost. He'd memorized every inch of this house in the dark. He knew where every piece of furniture was, every obstacle, every clear path. The attackers knew nothing. A quick strike to a pressure point and the first man went limp. A precise application of force to a nerve cluster, and the second man's arm went numb. The third one swung a bat wildly, hitting nothing but air, and Dante swept his legs out from under him. The fourth one actually made it 3 steps into the living room before Dante caught him in a joint lock that made him scream and drop to his knees. 20 seconds. 4 men down and Dante was already moving back into position before the others outside even understood what had happened. "Tommy, Brad, y'all good in there?" Someone called from the porch. No answer except groaning. Dale's voice, angrier now. "What the hell is happening?" "Get in there!" 3 more men rushed the door and the same thing happened. The darkness, the obstacles, the complete disorientation, and Dante, methodical and precise, taking them apart one by one. He wasn't trying to seriously hurt anyone, just disable them, make them unable to continue. But in the smoke and darkness and chaos, it seemed like there were 5 people defending the house instead of 1. Upstairs, Isaiah watched the back of the property. 2 men were trying to sneak around to the back door, thinking they'd found a weak point. He grabbed his last bucket of water and timed it perfectly, dumping it just as they reached for the door handle. They jumped back, cursing, and he could hear Dante's voice below. "Back door's covered." The men outside were starting to panic now. Nothing was going the way they'd planned. The house was still standing mostly. 7 of their friends had gone inside and none had come back out. Water was randomly falling from the sky, and somewhere in that dark house someone was picking them off like they knew exactly what they were doing. Because they did. Dale was screaming now, all pretense of tactics gone. "Forget it. Just shoot! Put rounds through every window." This was the moment the brothers had been dreading. When the guns came out, everything became exponentially more dangerous. You could defend against bats and fists and even knives if you were skilled enough. But bullets were different. Bullets didn't care how well trained you were. Isaiah dropped flat to the floor as the first shots rang out. Windows shattered all over the house, glass raining down. Rounds punched through the walls, old drywall and wood offering almost no protection. He army crawled to a different position, one he'd scouted earlier that had a structural beam between him and the most likely angles of fire. Downstairs, Dante had already moved to the interior hallway, the only part of the house with brick walls on both sides from an old chimney structure. Bullets whined and cracked, but none found him. The shooting went on for maybe 30 seconds, though it felt like hours. When it finally stopped, the silence was almost worse. Smoke drifted through the broken windows. The smell of gunpowder mixed with burning wood. The house looked like a war zone. "You boys dead yet?" Dale called out. He sounded almost hopeful, not even close. Dante shouted back. The anger in Dale's voice was palpable.
How? How are you still alive?
"Because we're better at this than you are." More shots, angry and wild now. They were wasting ammunition, firing at shadows and empty rooms. The brothers stayed low, stayed smart, waited for the rage to burn itself out, and then they heard it. Sirens in the distance, still far away but getting closer. Multiple vehicles by the sound of it. Probably state police joining the local sheriff's department. "Cops," someone yelled from near the trucks. The shooting stopped immediately. Isaiah risked a look out the window and saw the men scrambling, trying to decide what to do. Some were running for the trucks. Others were trying to help their friends who were still in the house or lying injured in the yard. Dale stood in the middle of it all, frozen by indecision and fury. He'd brought 15 men, weapons, fire, everything he needed to terrorize 2 people out of their own home. And he'd failed. Completely. "This isn't over," he screamed at the house. "You hear me? This isn't over." But he was already backing toward his truck because those sirens were getting louder. The red and blue lights were visible now through the trees, multiple vehicles coming fast down the road. The trucks roared to life, men piling in chaotically. One truck got stuck trying to turn around too fast, its wheels spinning in the soft dirt at the edge of the driveway. They abandoned it and piled into the other vehicles, some men literally hanging off the sides as they sped away. They didn't make it far. A quarter-mile down the road, they ran straight into a roadblock of state police cruisers. Isaiah could hear the shouting even from the house, the orders to get out of the vehicles, get on the ground. Dante came upstairs, coughing from the smoke, his face streaked with soot. "You hit?" "No, you." "I'm good." They looked at each other in the dim light filtering through the broken windows. Their mother's house was shot up, partially burned and completely trashed. 7 men lay on the floor downstairs, groaning but alive. The front yard looked like a battlefield. But they were alive. They'd held. "Mom would be so mad about her house," Isaiah said, and despite everything, he almost smiled. "Yeah," Dante agreed, "but she'd be proud we defended it." The police cars were pulling up now, officers with flashlights and drawn weapons, shouting for anyone inside to come out with their hands up. The brothers took a breath, raised their hands, and walked out onto what was left of the porch. They were ready to tell their story. The whole story. And for the first time since they'd come home, Dante felt like maybe things were going to be okay. Not easy. Not simple. But okay, because they'd stood their ground and they'd won. The flashing red and blue lights turned the front yard into something from a nightmare. 6 police cruisers, 3 state police vehicles, and an ambulance were scattered across the property. Officers moved everywhere with flashlights, securing the scene, checking on the men who'd been left behind. Dante and Isaiah stood on the porch with their hands raised, not moving until they were told to. They knew how this worked. 2 black men, a house full of injured white men, weapons everywhere. They needed to be perfectly compliant, perfectly calm, or this could go sideways fast. "On your knees." "Hands behind your head," a state trooper shouted, weapon drawn. They dropped to their knees immediately, fingers laced behind their heads. Multiple officers approached cautiously, flashlights in their faces. "Anyone else in the house?" one officer demanded. "Just the men who attacked us," Dante said, his voice level and clear. 7 inside, all injured but alive. None of them are armed anymore. "We disarmed everyone who came through the door." "You disarmed 7 men?" The officer sounded skeptical. "Yes, sir." They were handcuffed, not roughly but firmly, and separated. Standard procedure, Isaiah knew. They'd keep them apart, interview them separately, look for inconsistencies in their stories. He'd been through hostile interrogations in countries where the people questioning him actually wanted him dead. This was nothing by comparison. Two officers escorted Dante to one patrol car, while two others walked Isaiah to another. They sat on opposite sides of the driveway, able to see each other but not communicate. The chaos around them was organized chaos now. Paramedics were bringing men out of the house on stretchers. None of them looked seriously injured, mostly dazed and hurting. One had his arm in a makeshift sling. Another was holding an ice pack to his face. The 7 inside were being loaded into ambulances while the men caught at the roadblock were being processed in the back of police vans. A tall state police detective, maybe 50 years old with gray at his temples, approached the patrol car where Dante sat. He had the weathered look of someone who'd seen everything at least twice. "I'm Detective Hargrove," he said, pulling out a notebook. "You want to tell me what happened here?" Dante told him everything. The diner, the parking lot confrontation, coming home, the warnings from Jerome, the phone calls to 911 that went nowhere, and then the attack itself. He spoke clearly, chronologically, leaving nothing out. He explained about the Molotov cocktails, the rifles, the coordinated assault. "And you managed to fight off 15 armed men by yourself?" Hargrove asked. "Not by myself. My brother and I worked together. And we weren't trying to fight them off. We were trying to survive until you arrived. 7 men are injured inside your house." "Yes, sir. They came through the door trying to attack us. We defended ourselves using minimal necessary force." Hargrove studied him for a long moment. "Minimal necessary force. That's interesting phrasing. Military?" "Yes, sir. What branch?" "I'd prefer not to say, sir. Some of my service record is classified." That made Hargrove's eyebrows go up. "Classified?" "Yes, sir." Across the driveway, another detective was interviewing Isaiah, getting the same story from a different angle. The brothers had told the truth, the whole truth, and their accounts would match perfectly because there was no reason to lie. Inside the house, crime scene technicians were already working, photographing everything, collecting the Molotov cocktails that hadn't broken, documenting the bullet holes and burn marks. One of them came out shaking his head. "Detective, you need to see this," he called to Hargrove. Hargrove excused himself and went inside. 5 minutes later, he came back out and his expression had changed. He looked at Dante with something between respect and disbelief. "Your house is set up like a defensive position. Furniture moved to create choke points. Water containers staged throughout, sight lines calculated, and the men inside aren't just injured. They're immobilized using techniques I've only seen in military training manuals. We did what we had to do to survive," Dante said simply. "Son, you did a lot more than survive. You turned your home into a fortress and held off a coordinated assault by a group that outgunned and outnumbered you." Hargrove paused. "Who exactly are you?" Before Dante could answer, a black SUV pulled up, and 2 men in suits climbed out. They had that unmistakable federal agent look. Clean-cut, serious expressions, credentials already in their hands. "Detective Hargrove? FBI. We need to speak with these 2 men." The next hour was a blur of questions and verification. The FBI agents made phone calls, checked credentials, confirmed service records. Dante and Isaiah watched as the agents' expressions shifted from skepticism to understanding to something close to amazement. One of the agents, a younger guy named Rodriguez, came back shaking his head. "Your commanding officers say you're both on leave for family business. They also say you're the last 2 people anyone would want to pick a fight with." "We tried to avoid the fight," Isaiah said. "Multiple times." "Yeah, we're getting that picture." Rodriguez looked back toward the house. "You know Dale Kruger has a record a mile long? Assault, weapons charges, hate crimes. He's been on our radar for 3 years. We've been trying to tie him to a network of white supremacist cells operating in this region. And now you can," Dante said. "Oh yeah. When we caught them fleeing the scene, we found weapons, communications, membership lists. This just handed us the biggest break in our investigation." Rodriguez almost smiled. "You two did us a favor, though I'm guessing that wasn't your intention." "We just wanted to bury our mother and go home," Isaiah said quietly. The agent's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." By 2 a.m., the handcuffs finally came off. The detectives had confirmed their story with forensic evidence, witness statements from neighbors who'd heard the attack, and the recordings from the 911 calls. It was clear self-defense, textbook justified. Hargrove handed them each a card. "You'll need to come in tomorrow to sign formal statements. And there'll be an investigation, standard procedure. But between you and me, you two did everything right. You called for help. You tried to avoid confrontation, and when you had no choice, you defended yourselves without killing anyone." He paused. That last part's actually impressive. Most people in your situation would have shot first and asked questions later. "We're not most people," Dante said. "Yeah, I'm getting that." The emergency vehicles gradually left, taking the injured men to the hospital under police guard. The crime scene techs finished their work and packed up their equipment. By 3 a.m., only one patrol car remained, parked at the end of the driveway to keep away the curious neighbors who'd undoubtedly show up once word spread. Dante and Isaiah stood in what was left of their mother's living room. The fire damage wasn't as bad as it could have been, but smoke stained the walls black. Bullet holes peppered the drywall. Broken glass covered everything. The furniture they'd moved for tactical advantage was scattered and broken. "Think the insurance will cover attacked by white supremacists?" Isaiah asked, trying for humor but falling flat. Dante picked up a framed photo from the floor. Miraculously, the glass hadn't broken. It was a picture of their mother on her 50th birthday, smiling at the camera with that warmth that had defined her whole life. She would have hated this, he said, all this violence in her home. But she would have understood why we did it. Isaiah found another photo, this one of the three of them at his high school graduation. "She always said we should stand up for ourselves. Never start fights, but never back down from them either. We definitely didn't back down. They spent the next hour trying to clean up the worst of it, but it was overwhelming. The house needed serious repairs. Maybe it needed to be torn down and rebuilt. They'd figure that out tomorrow." At dawn, they were sitting on the porch steps, exhausted and covered in soot, when Jerome pulled up in his truck. He got out slowly, staring at the house in disbelief. "Man, I heard what happened. Whole town's talking about it." He walked closer, taking in the damage. "They're saying you two took on Dale's whole crew and won." "We survived," Dante corrected. "That's not the same as winning. Looks like winning to me. Dale and all his boys are in jail. You two are sitting here having coffee." Jerome sat down on the steps next to them. "I'm sorry I couldn't do more. I tried calling the police earlier, tried warning them this was coming. We know. We appreciate you trying." Isaiah handed him a cup of coffee from the thermos they'd salvaged. "What's the town saying?"